evening and welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. Part 1 of a documentary released by the BBC on the 17th of January has created ripples back home in the UK, and the reason is simple. This documentary, titled India, the Modi Question, claims to examine the role of the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, Narendra Modi, in allowing the riots to happen. The documentary even has people who say that the riots were ethnic cleansing and targeted at Gujarat's Muslim minority. This documentary has now been called by the Indian External Affairs Ministry as propaganda and indicative of a colonial mindset. The MEA, today in the first ever official government reaction to this documentary, said...
behind it, and frankly, we do not wish to dignify such efforts.
But the charges don't just stop at what the External Affairs Ministry said today. The Indian diaspora in the UK has also been staging protests against the documentary, calling it one filled with half-truths and aimed at creating fissures in Indian society and deliberately project a negative image of India and in particular the Prime Minister of India. In fact, Lord Rami Ranger wrote to the British Foreign Office calling the Modi question a piece of work that insults not just India as a country, but even its Supreme Court. Why? Because remember, it is the Supreme Court of India that has examined these same details, these same facts, these same witnesses and these same incidents, and has actually given a clean chit to Narendra Modi for the 2002 Gujarat riots. But as far as this documentary is concerned, the most damning testimony is from Swapan Das Gupta, the BJP leader who was interviewed for the documentary by the BBC, and he claims that his interview has been selectively quoted in order to pad up a hatchet job.
I'm here because, frankly, I'm sick and tired of the continuous, inaccurate, bigoted reporting that the BBC does. I want the BBC to recognise the responsibility that they have to ensure that their reporting is accurate, it's non-biased, and it doesn't divide communities, which is exactly what they're doing.
So I think this documentary is a very short-sighted, has no vision, it doesn't look at a bigger picture. This event took place 20 years ago. Indian judiciary tried, tested everything.
Political analyst Qamar Zaman Chaudhary, leader of the Congress. But my first question is to Adit Kothari, founding member of the Indic Society, because you, Adit, have also been part of the protests that were held against this documentary and the BBC in London. The question is, why? Why do you have a problem with a piece of work that in India is being called great investigative journalism? After all, everyone has the right to tell their story.
That's great. Padmaja, thank you so much for having me on this show and, allowing us to voice our opinion on this this tragic event and this absolutely rabid broadcasting that was essentially executed by the BBC. Essentially, the problem is much larger. If you notice that this particular documentary was not released in India, and that was deliberately done by design. It was done so only for the consumption of the British public, because here we have a Prime Minister that wears his religion of being a Hindu, being a proud Hindu up on his sleeve, and proudly calls himself Hindu. The attempt was essentially to draw parallels between the UK's Prime Minister, who's a British Hindu, and India's Prime Minister, who calls himself a Hindu nationalist, draw parallels to them and draw a conclusion to say that, in India we have a Hindu fascist Prime Minister, and in the UK we have a Hindu Prime Minister. We've got to get rid of them both. And this is a deliberate attempt by the left intelligentsia based in the UK and the rabid journalists who have essentially lost every kind of objectivity while this broadcast. I mean, simple things like, the Gujarat government reached out to the neighboring states for police assistance. And the neighboring states were essentially all Congress ruled states who defied that and said that, we're scared that the riots may spill over into their particular states, and thus, we cannot give you police assistance. All of those kind of things, all of those kind of facts were completely omitted and deliberately omitted from that particular documentary. And people in India who do not recognize Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister, who do not agree with him politically are using this to their advantage, and that is
so
where
basically this documentary is an effort to try and discredit Narendra Modi, Qamar Zaman Chaudhary, despite the fact that he has been given a clean chit by the Supreme Court. How do you believe the BBC as opposed to the Supreme Court of India?
Well, Padmaja, first of all, it all depends. I'm not here to pass a judgment or be judgmental on the entire documentary that BBC has released. But, it's entire story depends on your subjective interpretation of the entire documentary, whatever it is. You can flag down a few very important points within the entire documentary, but then one thing, there cannot be a smoke without fire. There are lots of instances that people have pointed out through the Gujarat files.
What exactly is the smoke, sir? Let's be more specific. What is the smoke? What if I say tomorrow that you are a land grabber, and then Adit Kothari will be like, well, no smoke without fire. So hence you are a land grabber.
Padmaja,
even if facts do not show that you are actually grabbing any land. But since I claim that you are a land grabber, there is no smoke without fire.
Let me come to that. There are certain instances, as you can flag some issues within the documentary, there are certain issues which we need to flag in the entire issue from 2002 till 2002 Supreme Court's acquittal. There are a lot of issues that need to be discussed if at all we want to open up the Pandora's box.
No, let's talk facts. Let's not talk rhetoric about facts, Pandora's box, etc. Tell me a specific smoke.
I hope you
because
give me
I want to get to the fire.
2 minutes of your precious time.
So here let's start with the facts, okay? Here is what in black and white the Supreme Court said about the allegation that Mr. Modi actively abetted the riots of 2002. And I quote, "It's a devious stratagem to keep the pot boiling for ulterior design, and all those involved were doing an abuse of process." This is the Supreme Court of India. How is it that the BBC, completely contrary to the Supreme Court of India, which has found it a devious stratagem, has called the riots ethnic cleansing? How? Qamar Zaman Chaudhary.
Okay, 2 minutes, Padmaja, if you permit me.
Yes.
First and foremost, let me quote the reference of the General Zamir Shah in his book, The Sarkari Musalman, wherein he says, I have said clearly,
why are we going around in circles,
if you permit me,
when I am going straight to the point of the Supreme Court?
Please have the patience and the courage to listen to the facts.
I respect General Shah immensely, but he has not got access to witnesses, testimonies, phone records, government records, policemen who are testifying, victims who have testified, eyewitnesses who have testified. This is his version. Including all of this was examined by the Supreme Court of India. Sir, you are giving me anecdotal evidence. I am telling you a verdict that has been given after examining all of this evidence. Now let's talk about specifics. In its documentary, the BBC says that what happened in 2002 in India is ethnic cleansing. How is this possible, sir, when in the riots of 2002 in Gujarat, 790 Muslims unfortunately perished, but 254 Hindus died in the post-Godhra violence, plus 59 were burnt alive in the train at Godhra. How can it be ethnic cleansing, according to the diplomatic cable that has been quoted by the BBC, when Hindus also died and Muslims also died?
Padmaja, have you finished?
Yes.
I hope it is not a monologue.
Go on.
If you have called me, it has to be both sides of the debate.
How
where
is
you
it
can
ethnic
counter
cleansing?
me. Yeah, let me come to the point. Well, as I was telling you, let me just quote one small paragraph of General Zamir Shah's book. I feel the Godhra, with reference to the Godhra train incident, I feel the charred, blood-ridden bodies from the burnt bogies were aimed at provoking the riots. I asked the administration to immediately remove them. As they were igniting passion, they remained in view of the killing public and worsened the situation. Now here the administration has been directly responsible. made by General Zamir Shah.
Okay.
Then second point.
You have quoted General Zamir Shah. Here's what the Supreme Court of India says about the same Godhra incident and the violence that followed. This is also indicative of the fact that proactive measures were taken by the state, but it was overrun by the expanse of spontaneous mass violence. The SIT has noted that the SIB, being responsible to collect intelligence regarding law and order situation in the state, was at the relevant time gathering the intelligence. The authorities were supervising the functions of this department, have been named as part of a pre-planned larger conspiracy. It has been understood the allegation of pre-planned larger conspiracy and involvement of named high officials is unsubstantiated. Now, the Supreme Court of India has found that the police were given a free hand, there was no pre-planned conspiracy, and there was no involvement of higher authorities. This is as per agencies and the Supreme Court. Now,
I told you, ma'am, in the first place, it is all depending on your subjective interpretation of the entire issue. When you are reading the Supreme Court's judgment, the Justice Khanwilkar's report, the judgment that is, do you just go into the tone and the tenure of the language of the judgment order?
Facts. I go by facts. So let's come to the facts,
Padmaja,
which cannot be subjective. Let's come to the subjective facts.
Neither Padmaja nor any of the panelists nor Kamru has visited the Gujarat at that time in 2002, nor have we witnessed Narodaya Patia.
The Supreme Court, this is about the documentary, and the documentary which has very clearly indicated and insinuated that Mr. Modi was responsible for the 2002 riots. Let's be very clear about that.
No, Padmaja, the point here is that if a particular report is rattling so many people in the ecosystem, that there must be something in there. There must have been something.
It is rattling no ecosystem, it is rattling right-minded people who are looking at facts.
British highest official.
Manu Khajuria, just the fact that you are rattled by this investigative report is enough evidence that there is some truth to it.
Well, Padmaja, the fact is that there is nobody who's rattled by this report. I don't know what secret report they keep referring to. And as far as the BBC documentary goes, let us take a step back and see what the image of BBC is within UK itself. First of all, it's been called an ancient regime. It's been called a taxpayer-funded privileged autocrat. It is fast losing popularity and credibility within not just the British Indian or the British Hindu diaspora in UK, but by the white British themselves, the white British people themselves. The BBC Radio 4 program called The Today has lost 500,000 listeners in just 1 year. So Brits are turning off in record numbers from BBC. And why? Because their reporting, their documentaries, they're not partial. They do not believe in neutrality. How they are colonial, and just give me time to finish this, how they are colonial, we've got ample evidences. BBC had very recently aired graphics which called Rishi Sunak names I can't even repeat on national television. A former BBC journalist, in fact, described Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, had a very diverse cabinet. He called it a coconut cabinet, which is a very extremely racist remark. For a long time, BBC has been following a very vile, divisive ideology, mocking ethnic cultures, Hindu festivals, criticizing black and brown people who don't fall in line with the idea of them. BBC was very recently slammed by, and I repeat, not by necessarily only the British Indian diaspora, but by the white Britishers themselves about the podcast on Shamima Begum. And the Britishers actually protested and said that taxpayers' money was being used to, fund a PR exercise, what seemed like a PR exercise for this former ISIS bride. BBC has also been accused of anti-Semitism, not just anti-India and anti-Hindu sentiments. They broadcast folk songs which glorified attacks on Jews. Very recently, they gave platform to one of the main fake news peddler of the Leicester violence, Majid Freeman. Allegations against BBC have gone up to a level that right now a regulatory body, Ofcom, is actually investigating it because it is believed they do not serve the lower income groups. They do not represent everybody in the UK. And in fact, a major campaign against the BBC, which is not run by Indians or Hindus or any international agency, but by the white British people themselves, the director being Rebecca Ryan. She is running this campaign, defund the BBC. They have alleged and they have called BBC anti-British. So it's only natural that BBC does a documentary which, they've been formally accused of so much bias, so much anti-Hindu, anti-India activity. So this kind of a documentary being, aired 10 years later is not a surprise.
But why would they do it? Are you seriously saying that the BBC wants to unseat or discredit or slander or taint Mr. Modi? Why would they do that? They're sitting in London. Why would they care?
Well, exactly. The idea, the thought behind this clearly is questionable. And it's very well known that BBC has a colonial mindset. It still thinks it can control, foreign regimes. It can change governments. It clearly has a very disdainful attitude towards the largest democracy, that is India, towards the sitting Prime Minister. And their own Prime Minister has clearly said that he does not believe in this characterization.
Exactly.
The UK government has a clear stand. And the MP who brought it up is, of course, please, it's to be noted that he's a Pakistani origin British MP. The kind of ecosystem the previous speaker was referring to is very obvious to everyone.
So,
obvious not just to the
serious
British
charge
Indians,
there,
but to the
Anirban
white British
Banerjee,
people.
essentially that the documentary is just one part. This then is going to be taken up as a propaganda piece and a propaganda tool in order to slander Narendra Modi.
Okay, so sometimes it is the Time magazine, sometimes it's the New York Times, sometimes it's the Wire, and now it's the BBC. So the list goes on and on. Whenever there's some kind of objective reporting, of course, they suddenly become anti-Hindu, anti-India, anti-national, etc., etc. And this time it is no exception. So my limited 2 points are these, that Narendra Modi, when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, was barred from entering the United States of America for almost a decade. But when he became the Prime Minister of our country, and I urged the government of India even today to ask.
That same United States wants to do business with the same Narendra Modi. Can we please live in the present? That 2013 is gone.
So can we expect our government to demand an apology from the US? If the US is so dependent on us for their business,
can we talk about
our
the present issue?
Ask or demand
now here's the
for
thing.
an apology
I want to actually,
for
please
something
sir, I do not,
did?
this is not one of those rambling, rhetorical, then we'll yell at each other for 5 minutes and then we'll say good night. So let's be more specific about this one word you used.
This is fact.
You said,
you
want to talk fact, now listen to fact. You said that this is a great bit of objective reporting, so it has rattled many cages. Now here's something, because I actually sat through those 60 minutes. So here's something that I noticed. The documentary actually uses a clip of their reporter from 2002, and it says that 59 pilgrims, Hindu pilgrims, were burnt in this train at Godhra. However, many people have cast a doubt about who is responsible, even though some people blame Muslims. This is what the documentary says. Some people blame Muslims, but many have cast a doubt. I don't know who those many are, but here is what the trial court and the High Court of India has said about those people. Now, even as we speak, 11 people stand sentenced to death for burning Hindu pilgrims alive in Godhra. Their names are Bilal Ismail Abdul Majid, Abdul Razak Mohammad Kurkur, Ramjani Binyamin Behra, Hassan Ahmad, Jabir Binyamin Behra, Mehboob Khalid, Salim Siraj, Irfan, Mehboob Ahmad, Yusuf Hassan. Additionally, you have got another 20 people who have been sentenced to life. And by the way, their sentence was upheld by the High Court of Gujarat, which then went on to observe 5 accused people hatched a conspiracy, went to Kalabhai petrol pump to buy petrol, and Razak Kurkur went to M80 moped to a petrol pump. Then they started pelting stones and by use of weapons started breaking window glasses. Abdul reached coast S6 and Abdul Razak Mohammad Kurkur placed the mouth of the carboys in the broken window on the side of the toilet. So who are these people who in your objective piece of reporting doubt about who burnt the Hindu pilgrims alive? Anirban Banerjee.
Yeah. So this ghastly incident of the train burning happened under the watch of who? and the riots that took place where hundreds or maybe even thousands lost their lives took place under the watch of who? And this answer is known to everyone on the planet who keep at least some knowledge about our country.
Will you answer my question?
And that is the reason why the US had barred the entry of Mr. Modi.
You said that this is a piece of objective journalism. I am asking you, how can it be objective when it subjectively disregards the fact that there are 23 people who are currently serving sentences for the murder of Hindu pilgrims in Godhra, but the self-same documentary says, we don't know who killed them. How is it objective?
The documentary, if according to you or the ecosystem of the RSS BJP is not objective, why don't they file a lawsuit against the BBC? Why is there no legal procedure till now? We are seeing statements after statements from the government, from the BJP members, from the ecosystem members, but why no legal step till now? Had this been, say, for example, the Caravan or the Wire, or for that matter, any other organization that reports against the BJP?
You have dubbed it objective and real journalism, but I get the sense you haven't even watched a minute of it. Anyhow, Adit Kothari wants to respond. Yes, Adit.
No, I haven't. Of course, I haven't watched the documentary. I said the BBC is known for objective reporting.
But you find it objective journalism without watching it. That's good. You know, you should actually watch good journalism.
I said the BBC is known for objective reporting.
Objective? How do you know it's objective if you haven't watched it?
I said BBC is known for objective reporting.
Known for objective reporting. All right. Have you watched anything on the BBC?
BBC is known for objective reporting.
Since you just call this documentary objective without reporting it, I fear you may not watch them at all.
It's not just about my certificate, Padmaja. You can go out in the world, you can walk out of your studio room and ask any person, have you heard about BBC?
No, I have.
You can ask any person, have you heard about BBC?
Anyhow.
BBC is world renowned for what? For propaganda?
No. I don't even want to get into it. This is not about the BBC. This is about one documentary and about facts actually. So let's stick to that. Anyway, I'm sure they'll be like, you know, very, very happy to get your certificate of appreciation. Adit Kothari.
Dada, thank you so much for thank you so much for bringing a smile to my face, because everything that you have said is completely ludicrous and laughable. So, BB, if you haven't heard a word of what Manu was saying before you,
if somebody lacks the brains, if somebody lacks the brains of an adult, he will find it ludicrous. No problem.
You know, my vocabulary is slightly better than yours. So if I start throwing diatribes, you will be crying foul here. So let me come to the point. The first point that you raised about.
Okay, sir. Again, let's please have an adult debate over here. This is not a child's playground. Go on. Adit Kothari.
The first point that the gentleman raised about the US not apologizing, the gentleman doesn't even know that Barack Obama didn't even know till April 2014 that Narendra Modi's visa had been cancelled. Narendra Modi decided not to apply for a US visa post his cancellation in 2005. So those are facts that he's completely ignored and completely omitted from the little research that the gentleman has done. But most importantly, a lot of the people, and especially from the opposition camp, who are using this particular documentary to raise the fangs against Narendra Modi, are doing so completely on the basis of their biases against Narendra Modi, but at the same time,
actually, Huzaifa Amir Rashadi, this is more a case of confirmation bias. There are people in this world who have decided that Narendra Modi is guilty. The Supreme Court can say it, the United Nations can say it, God can himself appear and say it, but they will not believe them. They will believe the one person who will say he is indeed guilty. Confirmation bias, irrespective of facts.
देखिए पद्मजा, दंगे हुए थे, ये सबको पता है, और आज 20 साल हो गए. आखिर क्या वजह है कि वो आज भी मोदी जी का पीछा नहीं छोड़ रहे हैं? अगर मैं आपको तत्कालीन प्राइम मिनिस्टर का स्टेटमेंट कोट करूं तो
इसी उम्मीद में जिंदा है, उनकी राजनीति इस पे चल रही है कि मोदी जी का पीछा ना छूटे, इसलिए नहीं छूट रहा है क्योंकि कुछ लोगों की राजनीति चली इस चीज पे रही है.
ये क्या पहली राइट्स थी इंडिया में? ये क्या वाज दिस द ओनली राइट्स?
नहीं, बिल्कुल सही कहा आप लोगों ने. कुछ लोग उसी वजह से राजनीति में सक्सेस भी हो गए और मैं आपको कोट करूं उस टाइम के जो सिटिंग प्राइम मिनिस्टर थे बिहारी वाजपेयी ने कहा था कि गुजरात सरकार को राजधर्म का पालन करना चाहिए। इस स्टेटमेंट की डीपनेस को आप देखिए। नहीं, मैं वही कह रहा हूं कि अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी उस टाइम सिटिंग प्राइम मिनिस्टर थे, उनका एक कोट था कि सरकार को राजधर्म का पालन करना चाहिए। आप सोचिए कि उस कोर्ट में कितनी गहराई थी, कितनी डीप बात उन्होंने कही थी।
और उसके बाद सर अगेन यू नो वी हैव डिबेटेड दिस एड नॉजियम। बाय द वे दैट एंटायर कोर्ट फॉर एनीवन हु केयर्स शुड एक्चुअली गो ऑन यूट्यूब एंड लिसन। देन मिस्टर मोदी सेड हां मैंने किया है, एंड देन अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी आल्सो सेड हां वो तो है। बट एनीवे कैन वी टॉक सर अबाउट द फैक्ट्स? रशादी साहब फैक्ट्स की बात कीजिए।
अगर आप ही को बोलना है तो फिर बुलाया मत कीजिए मुझे। नहीं, मैं 20 मिनट से बैठ के सुन रहा हूं आपको। जब मेरी बोलने की बारी आई तो बार बार आप बीच में इंटरप्ट कर रही हैं मुझे।
सुप्रीम कोर्ट को बिलीव करते हैं?
अगर आपको खुद ही बोलना है, मोनोलॉग चलाना है,
या फिर आप हर चीज को कोट करेंगे, हर चीज को बिलीव करेंगे एक्सेप्ट द एक्चुअल कोर्ट जजमेंट?
नहीं, ये क्वेश्चन आवर सेशन नहीं हो रहा है। नहीं, क्वेश्चन आवर सेशन नहीं हो रहा है। मैं 25 मिनट से बैठ के सुन रहा हूं आपको तमाम।
चलिए बोलिए।
तो मेरा मौका है तो मुझे पहले बोल लेने दीजिए, फिर आप क्वेश्चन करिएगा मुझसे।
बोलिए।
मैंने कंप्लीट नहीं किया, आपने इंटरप्ट करना शुरू कर दिया मुझे। अगर वन साइडेड स्टोरी चलानी है तो फिर खत्म कीजिए।
बोलिए सर, वन साइडेड नहीं फैक्चुअल चलानी।
मैं उसी पे कह रहा हूं कि आज 20 साल हो गए, आज भी गुजरात दंगों ने नरेंद्र मोदी जी का पीछा नहीं छोड़ा। उस टाइम के सिटिंग प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने बोला कि गुजरात सरकार को राजधर्म का पालन करना चाहिए। राइट विंग के कई नेताओं के स्टिंग ऑपरेशन सामने आए, विश्व हिंदू परिषद के नेता सामने आए, जिन लोगों ने एक्सेप्ट किया कि किसके इशारे पे किस वजह से हम लोगों ने किया था। कई इंटरनेशनल पर्सनालिटीज ने उस टाइम बोला कि किन लोगों ने पुलिस को रोक रखा था, कि छूट दे रखी थी दंगे होने दो। तो बीबीसी ने क्या बोला क्या नहीं बोला मुझे उस पर नहीं जाना है। मैं बात कर रहा हूं कि उस टाइम सिटिंग चीफ मिनिस्टर थे हमारे मोदी जी, जो उनका कर्तव्य बनता था कि वो जनता के सामने आते, माफी मांगते अगर कुछ गलती उनसे हुई थी। आप बिल्किस बानो का केस देखिए,
पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने माना है कि उनकी गलती नहीं थी
20 साल से।
जिन लोगों की बाय द वे सर अगेन टॉकिंग अबाउट फैक्ट्स, ऑलराइट सो लेट मी जस्ट एक्चुअली बिकॉज़ आई थिंक दिस इज गोइंग डाउन अ रोड वेयर वी हैव ट्रैवर्स्ड 100,000 times. Let me actually, as opposed to a lot of people on this panel who haven't watched the documentary but are opining on it, let me actually point out to you about 5 to 10 things that I noticed. Here are a couple of observations. The documentary, about 5 minutes in, has a shot of a man who is standing in front of a burning shop and he's clutching his forehead. The reporter says, and this is from the BBC reporter in 2002, her voiceover says, I walked in and I saw a man who was completely distraught. It was a Hindu shopkeeper whose travel agency had been set on fire. Cut to the documentary which says, largely it was Muslim areas that were being attacked. I still don't know how they reached that conclusion. The documentary then says, Ehsan Jafri called Narendra Modi for help, but he was abused and Mr. Modi hung up on him. Eventually he was killed. Do you know that the Supreme Court appointed SIT said, and this SIT, mind you, was when the UPA was in government, the Supreme Court appointed SIT said that there is no record of Ehsan Jafri having ever called Mr. Modi. Second thing, you had BJP leader Haren Pandya being quoted in this documentary as somebody who admitted that he was in a meeting with Mr. Modi where Mr. Modi said that let the rioters run free. Give them a free hand. Let the massacre happen. Again, the Supreme Court appointed SIT during the UPA regime found that Haren Pandya's phone record showed he was not even in the area where the meeting took place. He wasn't even there, leave alone in the room, he wasn't even in the area. And that again brings me to the point that by all means people have the right to investigate, but how can you, Qamar Zaman Chaudhary, call something so blatantly, factually inaccurate investigation?
But the first and foremost thing, let me just clarify out here, it is not a Hindu who lost a life or a Muslim who lost a life. It was a laboratory that was started in Gujarat in 2002 and successfully gone through all these years.
By
that
who?
Is a plain fact and simple.
Laboratory by who, sir?
Very blatant. Let me be very blatant. The Hindutva laboratory opened its door in Gujarat. That was a fact. Otherwise, till date, who
was it a laboratory that was started by those
who killed Haren Pandya?
Who set
Nobody
the
knows.
train on fire?
How did Ehsan Jafri die? Nobody knows. What happened to the Bilkis Bano rapist? We all know. So don't please give me those excuses.
Sir, we all know because
appointed being as the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he appointed the Nanavati Mehta Commission in 2002 to investigate whom? To investigate him, to investigate Amit Shah's role, to investigate the other ministers in the cabinet.
How is it ethnic cleansing? How is it ethnic cleansing, sir? Now I'll tell you the context of this ethnic cleansing and bring in Manu Khajuria on this. Ethnic cleansing has been brought in because of a government cable that was sent in 2002 to the British Foreign Office, based on which they prepared a secret report, and that report for the first time has been revealed in this documentary, and that, Manu Khajuria, is independent. So today, if you are attributing motives to BBC, are you also saying that that diplomatic cable or that report was also malified? After all, that's all the documentary does, quote that cable.
Not only that, Padmaja, let me add, Jack Straw, a very high functionary of the British government at that time, he also accepted the facts about this BBC report. He says whatever is there in the BBC report are more or less factually correct. To date, even most of the people who were affected in the Gujarat riots still feel that those events that were shown, maybe they have skipped 1 or 2 episodes, but most of the episodes shown were actually happened on the ground. Can anybody deny that? It was a simple program initiated by the BJP in Gujarat with the help of...
Answer that, Manu Khajuria. It's not just about what the BBC says today, but that cable and the report from 2002 and what Jack Straw's testimony is. Manu Khajuria.
Padmaja, I think it is very clear, and we can look at what UK government stand on this particular issue is. I'm going back to it again and again because we are discussing what has been said, but we are not really discussing that who is it coming from. I, like you, I was watching the documentary, and in fact, I found it such a badly made documentary in the sense that BBC has not even pretended to be, impartial. It's given one side of the story. It has said things that you've already referred to, which are almost hilarious. There have been allegations which BBC has been peddling, the fake news that BBC has been peddling for a long time. Let me just finish, please. And I am somebody who does not have a colonial hangover, so I can tell you that though Mr. Banerjee said that everybody knows what BBC is about, I would again like to point out that by December 2022, there are almost 100,000 complaints against the BBC in UK alleging very partial reporting. So we have to understand who is saying what. What has been widely discussed in India, it should be debated, it should be discussed. Supreme Court has made a ruling, but please, the discussion here is about the BBC documentary, which has, by its own admission, it was forced to admit that it has biases. It has a left liberal bias. They have admitted, and its chief, Tim Davis, Richard Sharp, they have admitted that the broadcast has an obvious bias, and they have been not impartial in its coverage of, be it documentaries which are, according to leading academicians in UK, warping the British history, contorting it to fit agendas. We know that the BBC has an agenda, and that's the discussion here today. We are not discussing something which has been settled. We are discussing BBC agenda.
10 seconds, Padmaja.
No, so if this is all so very wrong, whatever the BBC has done via this documentary, where is the legal action from the government of India or any leader of the BJP? Where is the
everyone should be allowed to put out what they want to, but everyone should also know what the real facts are. Let the people watch it.
Against other newspapers or media houses.
Sir, why should we take action?
Why
See, here's the thing.
So many legal actions against
the
other
whole idea
is
that this is not about going after any one outlet. It is only about making it crystal clear that this is the documentary. This is being projected for political reasons by political people. But the viewing public has the full right to know the intent behind the documentary and the underlying facts as well. Go and watch it actually, and then read the Supreme Court judgment and make up your mind for yourself. Thanks very much, all gentlemen, Manu Khajuria, for joining me. There's news just coming in. Sports Minister Anurag Thakur, in fact, has invited all the